Hello friends, welcome to Credence as in this video we will be going to discuss about the major aspects related to the national parks. The national parks, as all you know, is one of the protected areas classified under the Wildlife Protection Act. Why we are discussing these national parks means recently the two important protected areas in the country or in the state of Assam has been upgraded into the national park status. That is, they have been upgraded to the national park status, so they have the more conservation efforts in order to preserve and protect the natural flora and fauna. So in order to discuss about the newly upgraded protected areas in the country, which is called as Raimona National Park, which is situated in the state of Assam, and so does the one more important protected area, that is Dehing Patkai, which is also been upgraded into the national park status. So in this video, we will be discussing the important aspects, important key features about these two national parks in terms of flora and fauna, in terms of location, and all other important aspects related to these national parks. Before going into understanding about these importance of these two national parks, first let us understand about some basics and important features related to the national parks. Okay. First, we'll understand about what do you mean by the protected areas. So, according to the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, which is considered as the landmark legislation in terms of preservation of wildlife, flora and fauna in India, based on that Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, it classifies the areas which need to be protected to conserve the natural flora and fauna into four major categories, that is the wildlife sanctuaries, the national parks, the community reserves, and the conservation reserves. So these are the four protected areas which have been classified under the Wildlife Protection Act. Now we'll look into the various aspects related to these. What are the, just will understand briefly about what you understand by all these. So I will be discussing in detail about the national parks, but we'll briefly understand about the community reserves and the conservation reserves. So community reserves and the conservation reserves are type of a very important aspects of protected areas, where in the community reserves, the land is not owned by the government. Here, the community land or the land which is not of a government property, which is maybe of a private property, is being used to conserve the flora and fauna or the conserve the nature. Here, the land is not government owned. It is usually owned by the community or the private person. That is the community reserve. The best example for community reserve in Karnataka or in India, or we can take the example of Karnataka, that is the Kokrebeluru. The Kokrebeluru bird sanctuary, which is situated in Mandya district, is the best example for the community reserve. If you look into the conservation reserves are those reserves which have been exclusively formulated to act as a buffer area or to protect the area surrounding the national parks or wildlife sanctuaries, so that they act as a cushioning or the buffer to the major protected areas. Here the land is owned by the government, but it will be protected. Using by taking the help of the local community, local people, and local organizations. So this is about the conservation reserve. The best example for the conservation reserve is also the Bankapur Peacock Sanctuary, Hornbill Sanctuary in Dandeli. These are the best examples for the conservation reserves in the Karnataka. I am giving the more specific examples related to states so that you can easily correlate with the areas. Okay. Now we'll understand about what you mean by the national parks. So national parks are those areas or a natural habitat which are set aside by the state government for the preservation of its natural environment. So I think you know about the type of preservation, right? Ex situ, in situ preservation. So national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, community reserves, and conservation reserves are the best examples for the in situ conservation, means where the flora and fauna are conserved in its own habitat, that is its own natural habitat. This is the example. The national parks is the example for the in situ conservation. Here the national park is notified by the state government and it will be approved by the central government. And also one more point which you need to understand here is the state government can fix and alter the boundaries of the national park with prior consultation of the National Board of Wildlife. With this you need to have an understanding. So the National Board of Wildlife will be headed by the Prime Minister of India, who heads that board, and this board is established through the amendment to the Wildlife Protection Act in 2003, and it acts as an apex body in order to conserve and preservation of wildlife habitat and the forest areas. This is about the national parks. Then we'll understand about the what is the differences between the national park and the wildlife sanctuary. So as we can see that the national park is an area that is exclusively designated by the government for the conservation of wildlife and biodiversity due to its natural, cultural, and historical significance. Okay, you need to understand clearly it is due to the natural, cultural, and historical significance. Whereas in the wildlife sanctuary, it refers to an area which provides protection and favorable living conditions to the wild animals. It focuses more on the wildlife animals, whereas it is due to the it gives importance to the biodiversity as well and the natural, cultural, and historical significance. The national parks are highly restricted areas which are not open to the people, whereas the wildlife sanctuaries have lesser restrictions than the national parks where the human interference is permitted. Human activities are strictly prohibited in the national parks. The human activities are allowed to a limited extent or in the what we call it as in a limited manner in the wildlife sanctuaries. The national parks have clearly fixed or demarcated boundaries, whereas in the wildlife sanctuaries, the boundaries are not so much sacrosanct or properly demarcated. Then the last point here is the most of the national parks were initially wildlife sanctuaries, which are then upgraded to the national parks. Before moving into the national park category, that protected reserve will be the wildlife sanctuary, then it will be accorded the national park status. Whereas the national park cannot be downgraded into the wildlife sanctuary. It cannot be downgraded, whereas the wildlife sanctuary can be upgraded to the national park. So these are the major differences between the national parks and the wildlife sanctuary. As I already discussed about the community reserve and conservation reserve, now I think you are clear with what you understand by the national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, community reserves, and the conservation reserve, right? Then we'll move into the national parks which are in news. That is the Raimona National Park and the Dehing Patkai National Park. You can see in the image. You can see in the image. This is the Raimona National Park. This is the Manas. This is the Orang. It is Nameri. This is Dibru Sikhao. Then comes the Dehing Patkai. Then comes the Kaziranga. So as we count it, the total number of national parks in the Assam will be 7, including the recently 2 upgraded ones. Okay. Here comes the Raimona National Park as a 6th, and the 7th comes the Dehing Patkai. So in this slide, we will understand about what are the peculiar features regarding the Raimona National Park. It is the 6th national park. It is the 6th national park of the Assam, which was announced on the World Environment Day, that is on June 5th in the 2021. On World Environment Day of June 5th, 2021, it has been announced. The Raimona National Park is within the Bodoland territorial region of Assam. So just I will give you brief introduction about the Bodoland territorial aspect. As you people have learned in the polity, that area which is inhabited by the indigenous peoples called as Bodos, it has been called as Bodoland territorial region. That region was infected, or what we call it as infected with the insurgency problem. There were so many insurgencies took place in the Assam, which were demanding for a separate statehood or separate nationhood. So there was insurgency going on in that area. So the Raimona National Parks comes in that Bodoland territorial region of Assam. especially in the Kakrajar area. The Bodoland territorial region comprises of 4 districts, that is Chirang, Udalgiri, Kakrajar, okay, where these Bodoland territorial region has been, those 4 districts are called as Bodoland territorial region. As per the agreement formulated between the government of Assam and also the government of India, this area will be administered by the Bodoland Territorial Council, which takes a decision, which I think you have learned in the polity aspect. So why I'm stressing on this here, because due to the insurgency aspect and due to the bloodshed, this national park has been used by the insurgents to act as a safe haven where they are going to hide their weapons, ammunitions, and used as the hiding area. So that there was some amount of destruction happened to this protected area. Now with the upgrading of the national park upgrading to national park status, now we can get the more positive aspects relating to the conservation aspect. Then the Raimona National Park includes the Ripu Reserve Forest and some buffer areas of the Manas National Park. In the previous slide, which we have seen the pictorial representation, the Manas is the neighboring national park for the Raimona. So the Raimona National Park includes the Ripu Reserve Forest and some aspects of the Manas National Park. And in terms of the rivers which flow in this national park are Sankosh River and Sararbhanga River, which are considered as the tributaries of the Brahmaputra. This Raimona comes in the upper stretches of the Brahmaputra, where the important rivers which flows in this national park are Sankosh and Sararbhanga, which are considered as the tributaries of the Brahmaputra River. One more very important aspect related to this Raimona National Park it is a transboundary conservation reserve, which means this reserve or this national parks shares boundary with the neighboring country, means Bhutan country. This Raimona National Park has a contiguous for the forest patches or the tree covers or the forest cover, and it mingles with the Phipsu Wildlife Sanctuary and Jigme Singwe Wangchuk National Park of Bhutan. So it is a continuous or contiguous stretch covering the Raimona, the Phipsu, and the Jigme Singwe Wangchuk. So that's why it is considered as a transboundary conservation reserve or transboundary conservation effort, where the conservation effort for the protection of natural flora and fauna takes place among 2 international countries or 2 international nations. That is why we call it as transboundary conservation feature or effort. Okay. So now we'll understand about the important the flora and fauna. Here in terms of the fauna, aspect, it is famous for the golden langur. It is called as endemic species and it has been used as a mascot for the Bodoland region also. This golden langur is an endemic species found only in this region, that is the Raimona National Park. Apart from this golden langur, other fauna which can be found here are Asian elephant, Royal Bengal tiger, clouded leopard, Indian gaur, wild water buffalo, spotted deer, hornbill, and so on other different species which are present in this Raimona National Park. Okay. Now we'll understand about the Dehing Patkai. The Dehing Patkai is the 7th national park which has been came into existence. The wildlife sanctuaries, Dehing Patkai was earlier a wildlife sanctuary which has been upgraded into the national park. It is also an elephant reserve, and the important it is found in the districts such as Dibrugarh and Tinsukia districts, which are considered as a coal and oil-rich districts of Assam. You can also see that there was some issue related to the extraction of mining related aspects in this Dehing Patkai region also in the recent times. And also the oldest refinery of Asia, which is called as Big Boy, is situated in this area, that is the Dehing Patkai. And also in this area also there is a coal mining at a place called Lido is taking place. It is an open cast coal mining project. The Dehing Patkai Wildlife Sanctuary is also called as Jaipur Rainforest Area, which has a unique rainforest, which is considered as very important from the point of natural preservation of natural flora. So now we'll understand how it got the name. So Dehing is the name of the river that flows through this forest, and Patkai is the hill in which is the name of the hill under its foot the national park locates. That's why the name is called as Dehing Patkai. Okay, Dehing is the name of the river as well as the Patkai is the name of the hill under below which the forest or the national parks is located. That's why it's called as Dehing Patkai. Then if you look into the various flora and fauna here, it is believed to be the last remaining contiguous patch of the rainforest area in Assam. So if you look into the rainforest area, the last patches of this rich rainforest area can be seen in this Dehing Patkai. Apart from this, when it comes to the fauna aspect, the rare faunas can be found in this region, such as Chinese pangolin, flying fox, wild pig, sambar, barking deer, and so on. And also, it is the only sanctuary or only reserve in India which is home to the 7 different species of wild cats. That is, the tiger can be spotted here, the leopard, the clouded leopard, the leopard cat, the golden cat, the jungle cat, and the marble cat. These 7 different types of cat can be found in this Dehing Patkai. And also, the Assamese macaw, a primate found in this forest, is also found in this region, and it is considered as in the red list of near threatened species. It has been classified under the International Union for Conservation of Nature, under the Red Data Book. It has been classified as the near threatened species. And also, one more important aspect related to Dehing Patkai is it has the highest concentration of white-winged wood duck. It is a rare endangered species. So this is about the Dehing Patkai. And after upgrading of Dehing Patkai and Raimona, the Assam has the 3rd most national parks. That is total 3rd most national parks in India after the Madhya Pradesh and Andaman Nicobar Islands. The Assam has 7, Madhya Pradesh 12, and Andaman Nicobar Islands has 9 national parks. So what are, just in the brief, we will look into what are the 7 national parks in the Assam. These are Dehing Patkai, Raimona, Kaziranga, Manas, Nameri, Orang, and Dibru Sekava. Then you need to have a clear understanding about the other important protected areas of the Assam, such as Kaziranga and Manas are considered under the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. There are 3 tiger reserves. There is 1 Ramsar site in the Assam, that is Deeper Beel, and there are 2 biosphere reserves. So which you need to have a proper understanding. There are high chances of these type of questions coming in the preliminary examination. So you need to have a proper understanding of all these protected areas. So just to give some of the aspects related to the national park, that is the first national park to be announced was the Jim Corbett National Park, which is located in the Uttarakhand, Uttarakhand. Then comes the largest national park, which is located in Jammu and Kashmir, and the smallest national park is in Andaman and Nicobar Island, which is called as South Bhutan National Park. So this is about the features of the various aspects of the national parks. Then, as far as from the numbers point of view, if you look into the national parks accounts for 105, so does the wildlife sanctuary, so does the community reserve and the conservation reserve. As a percentage of the geographical area, around 5% of geographical area of India is grouped or is classified under the protected areas. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video and you are able to understand the basic aspects and fundamentals of the national park. Thank you.